Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Well, I am so grateful to be here today with my good friend Randall Wright. Randall, thanks for driving all the way from Texas to hang out with me. I know that's why you're here.
Drive.
For flying in.
Yeah.
So Randall has a PhD from BYU in Family Studies. He's been a CES coordinator. He's been the Institute Director at the University of Texas Institute of Religion. He's taught here at BYU. Frequent speaker at Education Week, one of the first speakers, Randall, that you correct me on this, that I know of, that spoke at EFY from its inception back in the 1980s, right?
Well, it started in 76. I spoke at the first one outside of Utah.
Yeah.
And that was in San Diego. So the first one outside of Utah, and then directed the second one out in Texas. So
yeah.
Been with them a long time.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Founder of the National Family Institute, of lifemissionforyou.com, author of 12 different books, at least I know of those, and Randall, there may be more, but I'm going to just tell people a couple of my favorite ones. Power Parenting in the LDS Home, Protecting Your Family in an X-Rated World, which I think was one of your first.
That was the first.
Yeah, that was the first.
That was the Deseret book.
The Book of Mormon Miracle, and then mine, the other one that I just love, Randall, that we refer to, I'll tell you the two that I refer to the most, is 25 Mistakes LDS Parents Make and How to Avoid Them. Mm-hmm. But also, and this may have been your second book, but A Case for Chastity.
Yeah.
It still has so many of your awesome stories. Randall, you and Wendy live in San Antonio. You have 5 children, and how many grandchildren
21.
now? Way to go. That's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
There's 21 grandkids. I would want everyone to know that Randall has had more of an impact on our family than he probably realizes. But Janie and I have just read every book. We've talked about every principle. We've attended every class that we could. And Randall, you've had just a great impact on us. We've always looked at you and Wendy as, okay, you guys are about 10 years ahead of us, so whatever you're doing now is what we're going to be doing in 10 years.
That's great.
All those missionaries you have as grandchildren right now, our oldest is 11 or 12, so we know that we're coming on that in the next 10 years or so.
Yeah, they're just starting out. We've got 2 out right now, one in Montreal and one in Saratoga Springs, Utah. I guess he's in Lehigh right now, but he's in Saratoga Springs Mission.
Oh, that's so great. Randall, one of the you're here at Education Week here at BYU, and among other things, you're focused on grandparenting, which I think is such a great topic. It's one that I feel like we don't devote enough time and attention to. It's one that a lot of us, when we become grandparents, don't really have a plan of what we're going to do. And I will just tell you that I'm driving home from work, because you know that I have crazy stories, but I'm driving home from work in Dallas, and I'm thinking what we're going to do for family home evening that night. And I just thought, oh, you know what? Our youngest daughter just moved to a big girl bed, and we're done. We're not having any more children. And so and we have 8, so I think that's pretty good. So we're going to have a ceremony. We're going to take that baby crib. We're going to go in the backyard. We're going to smash it with hammers and sledgehammers and axes, and we're just going to make it into a pile of rubble, and then we're going to light it on fire and do like a little dance around it and jump over the fire. And I called my wife and told her that story, and she just said, "That's like insane. That's that's kind of what insane people do." And I was okay with that.
I was thinking similar thoughts.
I was thinking that's okay, but I just thought, no, let's have our ceremony. We're kind of done, and then my wife said something, and this is kind of cool because men tend to think linearly,
right?
And women tend to think cyclically, right? The first thing my wife said is, where do you think our grandkids are going to sleep when they come visit us? And it wasn't that I thought, oh, yeah. I mean, what I was going to say is, I literally thought when she said that I never even once at that moment thought about being a grandparent.
It's very common.
I mean, our oldest daughter was 16 at the time, and I was just thinking, her graduating and going to school and missions, but never even once thought I mean, it's in the back of your mind. But anyway, Randall, talk about that a little bit. I've heard you say some things about that, but a lot of us don't think much about grandparenting.
So if you wouldn't mind if I read something, we did some research and asked several hundred people to tell us about your grandparents. And I did the same thing with parenting. I just said, what are some good things your parents did, and what things do you think they could have improved on? And boy, they opened up. There was no checklist of how it goes. Just tell us what you want to say. And so they let it fly, what they said. And so we did the same thing with grandparenting. And so I'll try to change the names here. I hope I don't mess them up and go back to original names. So if I mess up here. But I want to just read something that one of the sisters said, because we was asking them what they did or anything they had about grandparenting. She said, one evening, as my husband and I sat in our family room with our daughter and son-in-law who were here visiting, my husband began asking questions. It went something like this. You've been married for 2 years, and this semester is your last in college. Obviously, your goal is to one day have family. So where are you guys at on that? So here's the parents excited to be grandparents, obviously, and pushing it a little bit. Hey, we're waiting for this. What are you thinking? But he said, are you thinking when you'd like to have children? As we anticipated their answer, our son-in-law sat up straight, getting a little excited, moving to the edge of the couch, leaning forward with his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together. He said, yes, we've been wanting to talk about this. We want to know what kind of grandparents you're going to be.
Wow.
Wait, what? I thought we were asking the questions. For the next 20 minutes, our son-in-law and daughter wanted to know what our plans were for being involved and what we're going to be doing as grandparents. How would we react if the kids were crazy and messy? How would we treat the second grandchild? Would we treat them as good as the first? Or was it better to not be the first grandchild since we didn't know what we were doing? What type of grandparents were we going to be? I responded with, well, I don't know. I've never been a grandparent before. I hadn't really pondered or planned what our goals and desires were as grandparents. I knew we wanted to be good grandparents. I'd already picked out our grandparent names, but that's as far as I've got. Maybe my husband and I need to talk about being grandparents. That was my plan, and it was the only plan I had. We had a playhouse built in the basement for future grandkids, but after hearing the list of concerns from our children, that playhouse didn't seem to get us any extra points. It was clear we needed a plan to grandparent with a purpose. Well, since she said that, when we did our research here about 11 months ago, now they have their first grandchild.
Okay,
so
they're there.
They did exactly what you did. It's like we're so excited to take the trip that we forgot to plan where we're going.
Yeah.
And so it's not intentional.
And maybe another variation of being excited to take the trip. I've seen more couples our age put more emphasis and time in what their grandparent names are going to be than actually doing anything with their grandkids, right?
That's exactly what she said.
Yeah,
she said, we've got the grandparent
we got the names
out. Yeah, I'm going to be coach.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's just not a lot in my experience and seeing this feedback coming in. People have not given it a lot of thought. They've thought about being parents way more than the grandparenting.
Right.
All of a sudden, but you are excited, but it's like we have nothing to do with that. It's kind of the mindset that's not our role anymore.
Yeah.
And you go, wait a minute, you're the grandparents. You've got some role. It may be totally different, but don't think you don't have a role.
Yeah.
A huge role, and probably second in importance.
Right. So Randall, did you have? Because I'm thinking of the era that you and I probably grew up in.
Uh-huh.
I'm probably like the 60s and 70s, and you may be the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
As a kid, right?
Yeah.
And so, did you have grandparents that were super involved in your life? Because I didn't. Our grandparents blew into town once a year, and it was really fun for 3 days, and then you saw them again the next year. But there wasn't much of an impact because they lived in Kansas City, and we lived in Houston, and
Well,
but what about you?
That's the difference between me and you. They didn't blow into town for 3 days and we didn't have fun. So it was totally different. First of all, my mother's side, so my grandmother died in childbirth when my mother was 13, so I never knew her.
Yeah.
So I never had a grandmother on my mother's side. My grandfather lived in Alabama. We lived in Southeast Texas, and so I saw him a few times. We would go there like every other year, 2 years or whatever, and he came. I remember him coming to Texas a few times. He remarried, so we had a grandma Zelma, but they were really country. And I remember when I was 12 years old, my mother, we were going somewhere, and we went to see him. And I walked in, we both walked in, and he said, "Mabel, who's this boy?" And she said, "You know who that is. That's Randall, your grandson." He said, "Well, why didn't you tell me you had him?" So that's one memory of my grandfather.
Yeah, that was awesome. We were tight.
I thought several years later, was he kidding? Was he? I tried to make myself feel better. Maybe he was kidding. That was my interaction with him. And then me and my sister went and saw him once, and he was a little older at that point. And here's my memories of the grandparents on that. So none of my grandmother on my. He was sitting in a chair every time I saw him, and he wouldn't even get up to get a drink, but his new wife waited on him hand and foot. So we were there a couple of days, and I can still remember, "Woman, bring me a glass of water." And she'd go run, get him a glass of water, and so he did it over and over. And I remember one time, and she was a member of the church. They were later sealed in the temple and stuff after they married, but she was really country. But she said, "Lordy, Lordy, this man's going to drive me to the nut house so fast I won't have time to pack a lunch." And so that's my memory.
That's your memory.
That's one side, and that's it.
Yeah.
Except he came to Houston one time, and they had a little kind of dome thing in Mobile where I think it seat like 5,000, and so he came, and I was about to go in the military, and we took him to the Astrodome. It just opened, and it was
1968.
65,000, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we drove up, and he got out, and he said, "Shoot, we got a dune this big in Mobile." And anyway, I thought, "Grandpa, you know what you're talking about, So he walks in, and it opens up, and I can still remember him looking aside, like, "Golly."
Yeah.
And that's my memory of. So that's my experience on that side. On the other side, my dad's father was a logger in Louisiana, so they'd move around constantly. And so my dad had about a 6th grade education, and the grandpa there was an alcoholic. My grandmother was a LDS convert, first one in the area as far as a child goes. But I didn't know my grandfather. He died when I was a kid. But my grandmother. She died when I was 10, and I remember going over to her house a couple of times, but I never remember her talking to me ever.
Yeah.
And I asked my mom, she died last year, I asked her, she was 98.7, but she was right on in her memory, and I said, "Do you think Ma," what we call my grandmother, "do you think Ma knew my name?" She said, "I doubt it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's my experience with grandparents.
So we both kind of grew up that way, and then from sitting in your classes, I've come to know this week but your mom, and I don't know much about your dad, but your mom was an exceptional grandparent.
She was,
right?
Yeah, that's, if I were to say, what kind of grandparent do you want to be? And I thought, I wish I could be like my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen anything like it, because my mom and dad, neither one of them had any education. My mom had to drop out of school. She had 3 younger siblings when their mother died at 13.
Yeah.
But she would work 60 hours a week, whatever. On Friday and Saturday nights, almost everyone, she had 3 kids, but she had 21 grandkids, but at one point they all lived within a 5-mile radius of her, and she was nonstop. She never complained. She would want them over there. She was unbelievable, and those kids would just flock to her. They would hug on her, sit in her lap, and I mean, it was the exact opposite of what I experienced.
What you grew up with, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Randall, so I told you my experience of how much time and thought and energy I gave to being a grandparent. I didn't even think about it until my wife said, where do you think they're going to sleep? But what about you? When did you start thinking about, okay, this grandparenting thing is coming our direction here?
Yeah. Well, it was at BYU, and you go, how newly married, really, and I was thinking about grandparenting for one reason, and that was I took a class from Reed Bradford. If you go over to the library, you'd see the top 10 professors in the first 100 years of BYU. Reed Bradford's on the wall. That was my sociology teacher. And so for one of our assignments, he said, I want you to write your own obituary and eulogy.
Wow.
And that was one of those things I go, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm X amount old, and I go, I'm going to be talking about my death, and hopefully it's in the future, but what kind of, and I thought of the whole thing, what kind of grandkids am I going to have? What kind of kids am I going to have? It's just my whole life flashed. What do you want said about you? He's the laziest, no good, you know? And I go, no, I don't want him to say that. What do you want him to say? And boy, I heard one of my granddaughters give a talk at her great-grandmother's funeral, and I thought, wow, I wish somebody would say something even positive about me. But I thought about, what will your kids say about you? What will your grandkids say about you? And so right then I did think about it, not that I did anything or even made any significant plans, but I did leave BYU with the intention of being the best parent, grandparent I could be. So it started early, and so I've thought about it quite a bit.
Yeah, which is great, because that leads us into this idea of intentional grandparenting. How would you describe this movement of, okay, we want to be intentional and purposeful about what we do as grandparents?
Yeah. Well, first of all, in some of the research we're doing now, I saw that you got to be careful.
Yeah.
You got to be really careful, because you're dealing with in-laws that may have been raised very different than your kids have been raised. And some kids, as I'm sure you've found out with 8 kids, and you'll find out even more in the future, some of them want you to be more involved than others. Right. And so I would say on the intentional, we all want to be the best grandparents we can possibly be. What is it? So on the one hand, talking to a mother of 6, she lives about 48, I looked at it, about 48 miles from where her house is to where her in-laws and her kids' grandparents lives. And I asked her the question, how involved are they? And she almost laughed, but I could tell it was a hurtful laugh. Right. She just said, well, let's just say this. They've been to our house 2 times in 6.5 years.
Wow. And they live an hour away at the most.
Yeah, right? An hour away at the most. And so I said, I mean, they have a car? Or they got health problems? No, they're fine. Simple married, LDS family, and just not involved. She said that when her son went on a mission, there was no coming to the farewell talk. There was no coming to the priesthood ordination, nothing. She said kids graduate. They didn't come to those. Just,
completely aloof as grandparents.
Totally aloof.
Yeah.
So no intention. So I shared an experience at Education Week here of our friend, I think it's both our friend Kent Hugh, if you remember Kent. You lived in Spring area, didn't you?
I grew up in Spring, Texas,
well, there's an old town. Yeah. And at that time, there was a wood carving place. And, anyway, we went in, and I'll never forget this because it had a major impact on me, and it was, we saw this Indian chief, that the wood carver, and the wood carver was there, and Kent said, how did you do that? And he said, well, I just shaved away all the wood that wasn't an Indian chief, and that's what I had left. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty powerful concept there. Right. Because what he's really saying is he saw in vision what he wanted the end to be, and he was intentional about what he was doing. And I thought, we can apply that to whatever, but in this case we're talking about grandparents, so what is it that we want to be? And then in meetings with kid in-laws, whatever, hey, how can we best help you? How can we best support you? How would you like if we could come to the baseball games? Would you like us to be there? We would love to be there. We just don't want to step on any toes here. Just tell us what you want, and let's just try the best we can to meet it. Well, we live 900 miles away. We cannot come to every baseball game, obviously, so how can we work this out? Well, do you think you could, and you say, hey, that sounds reasonable. We will come to whatever. Yeah,
we could come we will come out there this fall or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but we're intentional about it. What is it that you want to do? And for us, we just wanted to be supporters of our kids, and we just thought, hey, these are our kids in a sense too. Just because it's one generation removed, we're the grandparents.
Yeah.
But we have a different role.
Right.
We're not the disciplinarians, we're all that, and we say, thank goodness, because what those kids need is a little bit of the basic human needs met. And we talked about it, and, they need love, they need affection, and so, hey, I'm intentional. When they walk through that door, I'm going to give a hug every time.
Right.
And when they leave, I'm going to give them a hug, and I'm going to tell them I love them every time that they leave, and it's going to be a tradition, and it's intentional, it's planned. And now, I think we've done it enough. When those kids walk through the door, they come over and give us a hug before they go do anything else. And you go, how'd that start? And you go, well, it just kind of started. And now it was intentional, but it helps. So with all of those things, it's been a planned out theme. So it was intentional based on the kids, their parents, whatever, but it's a planned thing.
Randall, I like what you said, and I think when you talk about purposeful or intentional, I love that your first move was to say to your own children, what do you want? What do you need from us? How can we? I think if every grandparent did that, it would also solve about 90% of the troubles that we encounter too. Because some, like you said, some want us involved in everything, and some don't need us involved in much. And
I found that they don't want you too involved.
Yeah,
they don't want you over so much that you like some. Yeah. It's not a fun thing for the grandparents to come over. It's like, oh my word, they're back again.
Here they are. Yeah, they just walked through the front door. They didn't knock, and here they are. And I think that's great. And then I'm going to just take this one step further, because I know that you and Wendy have so much purpose to what you're doing. Everything is like almost scripted of, okay, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there. And one of the influential pieces to your grandparenting life is the spiritual part, which we love that part too. I feel like I don't ever want our grandkids walking out of our house not knowing that their grandparents are LDS or not,
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you guys do on a spiritual level as grandparents, because that's, as you said, you're supporting your children. You're the second level, but you're coming in here with some spiritual pieces that you're, adding onto the layer that your children are building with those kids, and it's really cool what you're doing.
Yeah, well, the first thing, and this is a planned thing too, and I think a lot of people do it, but when they walk in the home, they see certain things.
Yeah.
And so I remember one of our common friends, or somebody we associated with, how he got hired in the church education system is the administrator or the personnel director came into his home. He said, hey, do you mind if I look at your movies? He went over and started looking at all his movies, and then said, wow, you got a lot of books here. You mind if I look at your books? He said he never asked him one question about anything else. He asked him if he wanted to work for church education system.
Yeah.
Basing it on what he saw in the home.
Right.
His movies and books told it all. Well, I think our homes tell a story, and the pictures on the wall tells the kids who we are. For us, we have a little goal, and it was purposeful too, is that we go to every temple in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so if it's been dedicated and it's open, we've been to it. We just completed again. We went to Taylorsville and Layton, so we're caught up.
You're caught up now.
And we go to Canada and England, the first three places the church went. So we've got all those temples, things 106 or whatever, and you go, big deal. Well, it's on purpose. We want to show those kids that we love the temple. So my wife has a book on the little table there in the living room that the first 100 temples.
Yeah.
And it's on there for the kids to see, the grandkids, and you'll see them looking at it at the different temples. And again, it's on purpose, but there's pictures of Christ in there. And so we start off there, and then we have a few traditions, and one of those is that we go, and we've got a little schedule there, but the day after Thanksgiving, we're going to the temple with everybody that's in town. All the kids for the temple recommend going to baptisms, and we take pictures and give it to the family and stuff. But again, it's a planned thing, and it's all spiritual based on. They know how we feel, but we're not necessarily preaching to them every minute. We're just trying to show them that this is what we believe, and they're all on board so far.
Well, that's great. What about your church history trips? This is something that Janie and I are looking forward to as our grandkids just get a little bit older.
Yeah.
We're so close. We're like a year or two away now.
Yeah, well, first of all, we want them to be able to go to the temple. So when we started it, they were 13. We had kind of the grandparent camps and got that going. But now we take trips. I think we're coming up on our 5th one, but we take them to church history sites. So 4 years ago, I think, we had 4 13-year-olds. So we went to Palmyra, all of that area, saw the church history, went to the Grandland Press, all of the things, but we also went to the Palmyra Temple. And then we always do something fun too. So it's the church history things, then we crossed over into Canada and did some of the things there, went on the Maid of the Mist
yeah.
and did that stuff with them. Last year, I think it was, we went to we started off in Council Bluff. We started off in Omaha, went to the visitor center there, but 2 of the girls, they were twins, that's where their mom went on a mission, so we showed them where their mom's on a mission, went to the tombstone, went to the temple there. Then we went to Nauvoo, went to the temple there, did all the things, the 2 pageants, the British and the Nauvoo pageant, and then we came back to Kansas City and went to Worlds of Fun or whatever amusement park. And so we try to make it spiritual and fun at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's a tradition. They pay their own airfare, so we tell them this is the trip, it's coming up this time. The parents are totally on board. We talk to them the whole time. I'm sure some parents out there would say, well, I wouldn't let my kids go with their grandparents on these trips, but they're all on board. They're excited for their kids, and the kids pay their airfare on purpose to give them some buy-in.
It's an investment, yeah.
Yeah, and then we pay for everything else, the food, the hotels, and any admission to whatever. So it's been fantastic.
What a great bonding experience for grandparents and their grandkids.
Bonding in a spiritual thing. They're having fun. They're laughing, and we play games at night when we're in, and it's been wonderful.
Randall, one of the things I've loved hearing you talk about over the years is this idea of this combination. You call it the EFY model, or so, I don't know what you actually call it, but it's the idea of we are going to combine spirituality with fun, which in our life, that is exactly what we want to be able to do, is that combination. But you guys, I think, have done so well with it. Tell us more.
Well, I worked with especially youth for a lot of years, and I would ask kids, how was your week? And the things that came across over and over and over, and I'd just say, if we were to do the surveys, I'm confident that this would come out the 2 at the top. Number 1 is the most spiritual week I've ever had in my life. Number 2 is the most fun I've ever had in my life. And I go, whoa, how did you combine those 2? Because the world's fun, that doesn't go there. They don't do any of the things the world says is fun, and yet those kids said they had fun. And to combine the spiritual, and I thought, EFY can't control all that. We could actually bring that into our families.
Right.
And
they don't have a market on that.
Yeah,
right?
They don't have it. They don't have any copyright on fun and spirituality. We could try to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think not enough of us focus on that. And William Glasser, one of my favorite, when I was doing research here at BYU, he was probably my favorite of the researchers. He's a psychologist. I was down in California, and he kind of played off of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. But when he said his 5th one, I still remember reading it. He's talking about love and affection and all those kinds of things that we need, freedom and
survival. And yeah.
But he gets to the end and he says fun is a basic human need. And I go, what are you talking about?
Right.
Until I thought about it.
Sure.
And then you start thinking about it and you go, wow, Satan's got a copyright on that now. Because if you go down to high school, let's go have some fun Friday night. They're not talking about doing the chicken dance or the state dance. So I go, wow, if we could capture that in our families, we'd be meeting a basic human need. And so as grandparents, sometimes parents maybe are not in as well financial position at the time to take these trips, and maybe grandparents aren't either, but if we're intentional, wherever we are right now and we're planning on it, I kind of let the businesses of America help me pay for the things that I'm going to do with my grandkids. In other words, if I'm going to buy some name brand clothing, it's from Sam's or Costco. I'm going to buy the cheapest gas around.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive cars until I can't think of the last car that we've sold after it was used.
Yeah.
It goes to the kidney
Goes right
foundation.
to the kidney foundation.
To the kidney foundation.
Yeah.
So it's all planned because I want a home that's inviting, and I want, different people, different things. We work for church education, but I did it intentional that we were going to have a home that was a gathering place in the inn.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got right now. We've got about 2 acres, got a swimming pool, all those kinds of things. The
Kool-Aid house is what we call it.
But I told the grandkids, I said, look, this swimming pool, this hot tub, the trampolines, all that, this is not for me. I've never jumped on a trampoline once. I've never been in that pool. I've been in the hot tub twice and the pool 0 times. I said, that's your guys' pool. It was built for you.
Yeah.
So you bring your friends over anytime you want. President Hinckley said, let them eat your food, close your eyes so their friends can eat the food too. We just don't care. It's planned. We don't care.
Yeah.
We want them there. We want them to have fun. And if they can have fun at our house, and maybe their parents can't afford that right now, and we couldn't have either if the businesses of America wouldn't have helped us, and the Austin housing market on sold houses wouldn't have helped us. But
right.
It was all planned.
Yeah.
It was a planned thing. And so fun was the driving, and the EFY just said, hey, make it fun too. And I go, well, it takes more work to make fun if you don't have some things for them. So I go, hey, I don't want to try to entertain them. Just let the pool or whatever that we have there, the games, they can entertain themselves. But they have an opportunity to do it there. Then we get to meet the grandkids' friends. They have parties there all the time, have teenage parties at our house. We
right.
just kind of go into our bedroom and let them do it. And some cases, if we're not there, we make sure there's an adult in charge, whatever, but it's planned.
Yeah, yeah. So faith and fun, because I know you well enough to know that when they're at your house, they're probably receiving some type of gospel message or instruction as well, right? Or something.
We try to get involved enough to, there's some teaching going on at the same time. It's all part of it.
It's all synced up. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Randall, one of the things I was impressed with, it really changed me, because for me, it can be overwhelming when all of our grandkids come over and our children, and there's like 40 people in our house, right?
Yeah.
And then I read where President Nelson would make sure that they would have a once-a-month gathering, with the whole Nelson family. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you have 150 people, and they're doing it at the chapel because you can't even fit that many people in a house, but it's his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And he would make sure that he personally touched and spoke to every single person there. And as soon as I heard that, I said, that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to have any of my children or grandchildren walk into my home without us having some kind of connecting point, Well, you have always been so good at this, and I know that all of our grandchildren are different, but what is some counsel you could give on just how do we connect with our grandkids?
Well, first of all, I think since they are all different, they're going to be doing different things, and for most grandparents, they see what their grandkids are doing, and some of the things they don't approve of.
Right.
It's how they dress, or how they comb their hair, or how long their hair is, and all those kinds of things. And I just a few minutes ago taught a class and showed a little video clip of a little 4-year-old boy that was on a farm. He had a hat on, and he had a chicken in his arms, but he had a little, one of those little battery-operated tractors, but he had, I think it was 5 little trailers behind him, and in the trailers were a rooster, a rabbit, a couple of rabbits, and then but he went and kissed every one of those things down the aisle, and then he had some goats and some geese, but he was holding a little chicken, big chicken, the whole time. Those little rabbits or whatever it was he was kissing, they didn't run from him. They just stayed there and kissed him. And so then he goes off. As he's with his little tractor and trailer with all these animals on it, you see more geese and lambs and whatever following him. He gets to the end, and I thought, there it is right there.
Wow.
And in our day and age, that could be our grandkids are just totally different.
Yeah.
But you could tell they loved this kid. Why? Because he loved them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he didn't care what their orientation was, all that kind of thing. He just loved those. And so I think for us, it's so easy to be judgmental of them.
Sure.
And things are different. They're very different. And those kids are exposed to things we've never been exposed to before. And we have no idea what they've really been exposed to. We don't know if they're bullied at school. They may or may not tell you. We don't know if they've been abused. We don't know any of those things. And so what those kids probably don't need, they need teachings. They don't need preaching and criticism, though.
Yeah.
They need love. And so if we'll let the parents deal with
let the parents be the parents,
the
right?
parents deal with the short skirts and the modesty and the long hair or whatever the case may be, what those kids need is a cheerleader, is what they need. Because there's not a lot of cheerleaders out there. In fact, there's a lot of bullies out there. There's a lot of mockers. There's a lot of peer pressure and all those kinds of things. So, and that's what my mom was. And she was like the Pied Piper. It was unbelievable. They could walk in the door and they knew she loved them. And those kids would just go up to her.
Just flocking to her.
In her 90s, she's got kids just hanging on her wherever she goes. And you go, why? And it's like me. I could go to see my neighbor's dog and walk up to it and the dog, "Rawr!" and go, dumb dog, how did you know I didn't really like you? Oh, they know.
Yeah.
A dog knows if you like them or not, and so does a kid.
Yeah.
And for some grandparents, you wonder. Sometimes grew up in a different age. This is how you did it. This is what you do. And boy, seeing it change is really rough. You got to bite your tongue sometimes with the grandkids. But they don't need any more yelling at or anything. They need someone to turn to. And so that's what would happen, like in my mom's, of her grandkids and great-grandkids. I think she had 82 great-grandkids, but she knew all of their names. She knew something about them. If she saw them, come give me a hug. I mean, it was...
What was the story, Randall, I heard you tell about how someone asked your mom if she... What did they say? There's no way you could name all of your great-grandkids or something?
Yeah, it was one of the grandkids. She was talking about one of the great-grandkids and this, and they said, you can't know all of those great-grandkids. She said, try me.
Yeah.
She was 98 when she said that.
She could have rounded 98 names off right there.
So again, I think the bottom line is, and we talked about this earlier, not in this, where Ammon went into King Lamoni, and you go, what in the world, going into vowed enemies that, their whole thing was to kill the Nephites, and you say he served him. No, he loved him. That's why he was able to get to him. And then why did Aaron get to his father? Because the father saw that Ammon loved his son and took up for him.
Right.
And you just go, wow, the power of, well, if it can convert thousands of Lamanites, enemies, maybe if we take the Ammon approach instead of the yelling at them approach,
put your cell phone down,
maybe we can get through to them and be the influence they need. And so for my mom, we've had maybe one of her great-grandkids came home from his mission, or a grandkid came home from his mission from anxiety or stuff and was struggling to go out. It was her that had the influence on him to go back out.
Yeah.
And he'll be forever grateful for a grandmother that he could talk to.
Yeah, that's so great.
Didn't judge him.
That I love that.
Didn't do anything. And there was more than one, and one spoke at her funeral and thanked her for saving him.
Wow. So powerful.
They won't come to you if they see that around you, that you're judging them or think less of them.
Right.
And so no matter what they did, she loved them.
What a great grandma.
Yeah.
Well, Randall, this has been so awesome. Wish you lived closer. We could do this every week.
It'd be fun to just talk.
Yeah. So, one of the ways we like to end these episodes, we love to quote Brent Barlow, who said that LDS is an acronym for Let's Do Something. We love to give little invitations so that we can all improve and grow and become better. Randall, what would be an invitation for those listening today?
Well, I can sum it up real good. It won't be just an invitation to be a better grandparent. It'll be an invitation to be a better person, to be a better whatever, better relationship with. I was in Steve Covey's class before anybody knew who Steve Covey was. It was an undergraduate. I was taking organizational behavior. And he didn't call it prayer. He just talked about inspiration, but he was in an organizational behavior class, so he's trying to be professional about it. But he said, if you want answers to how to do something, you write the question down. And I thought about that, and he said, we're going to try it right here and see if we get any answers. So he said, write down this question: how can I be a better person? ? And he said, now we're going to take a little time. We're going to go quiet, and you just, if anything comes into your mind, you write it down. And it was amazing. You saw people writing everywhere how they could be better people, and I thought, wow, that's powerful. And so I kind of adopted that as a bishop, as a church leader, whatever. Somebody would come to me and, what should I do about this? And I go, I have no idea. I don't know how to answer that. I mean, you got how to do this with my kids. I said, there's no stock formula for every single kid. They're all different in your own. We got twin granddaughters. They're so incredibly different. They're not even close. Right. But that principle, this. And so if I could invite anyone out there listening to do this one thing, just get your pencil and paper, your phone, wherever you can write, and say, how can I be a better grandparent? ? And when an idea pops in your mind, you just write it down.
Yeah.
And you keep thinking about it, and you keep writing down, and all of a sudden, I have no doubt, it's an answer to prayer. The Lord's whispering to you what you should be doing. And if you feel strong enough to write it down, you need to act on it.
Yeah.
And so we did it today in a class. I let them stop. I couldn't get over their shoulder to see who was writing, but it looked like almost everybody in the Joseph Smith Auditorium was writing something on how to be a better grandparent. And so if we would all just do that, how can I be a better person? How can I help Janie? How can I be a better husband, wife? But right now we're talking about grandparents, and our grandparents' role is huge because we're losing our grandkids.
Yeah.
And the parents are going crazy trying to save them, and the kids don't have anywhere to turn because they feel uncomfortable, so the grandparents can step in. And so if we would ask that question, I promise you that you will start getting answers, and they'll be good answers, because if they pop in your mind, the Spirit's almost always involved in that. And if you feel strong enough to write it down, so Joseph Smith goes into the Sacred Grove with a question. He comes out with the first vision. He wants to know if there's just a heaven and hell, and he comes out with section 76, and so that's our formula here. We're asking the question, how can I be a better grandparent? And I promise the Lord will answer that question.
Yeah.
To you, to your financial situation, to you, it may be a cabin in the mountains for some. It may be, hey, redo your back porch. I don't know what it'll be, but he'll start speaking.
I love that. I'm thinking of Stephen R. Covey's talk that he gave probably after your class called An Educated Conscience. I don't know if you've heard that one before, but he kind of does that whole exercise in the devotional at BYU. And then he says, he said, how many of you had something come to your mind? How many of you wrote something down? And then he said this, or he said, how many of you think incredible results would occur if you did what you wrote down? And of course, everyone's like, oh, yeah, that'd be... Yeah. He goes, well, there's your revelation, right? So, Randall, great counsel, great visiting with you today. Thank you so much for being with us, and look forward to hopefully one day doing this again.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.